bring our Tuesday, October 24th agenda session to order. Can I get approval on the minutes? I don't see anything so far. We have planning items as well as item under police. All right. We have ordinances under first reading. Okay. If you have any comments or questions, please hit your light. We have planning items. All right. We have resolutions. We have council office, economic development, and public works. If you have any comments or questions, hit your light, please. Okay. If you would take a look at next week's proposed agenda items. And if you have any comments or questions, please hit your light. There are several items regarding the Westside, the One Westside plan that will be on our agenda for next week, and we will cover a couple of those things today in our economic development meeting. All right. Purchasing question. Oh, sorry, Councilman Henderson.
Well, and I guess we'll have a parks and outdoors, but to get a little bit more information about why we're going to eliminate the park rangers positions.
Okay. Under.
Not now, but.
Okay. You said not now?
Well, I mean,
now?
that'll be in Parks and Public Works.
Oh, okay.
Whenever we have that. I mean.
For next week?
For next week.
Okay.
I'm just saying somebody needs to be prepared.
All right. Okay. Jermaine, somebody be prepared? Yes. All right, thank you. Okay, anything else, Councilman Henderson?
That's it.
You good? Okay, thank you. We have purchases. We have 4 purchases this evening. Any comments or questions about those? All right. If you would take a look at future considerations, any comments or questions? Okay. I don't see any lights. We don't have any departmental reports. We don't have any committee reports. We do have an update on the One Westside plan, and also following this, we do have an attorney-client meeting. So if there are no other comments or questions, we will go ahead and get started with our One Westside update. All right.
Good afternoon, members of council. Thank you for allowing us to provide another update on the One Westside plan, which includes the Bend and Westside Evolves. I wanted to recap some information about the project, and then I wanted to give Carmen Chubb, who is the president of Columbia Residential, which is the master developer for the Chattanooga Housing Authority, a chance to respond to some of the questions that were raised during our previous Economic Development Committee meeting. And so just as a recap, the One Westside plan envisions really sort of a guidepost of how we can sort of create one West Side on this city of Chattanooga's West Side, where we could take a private sector-led project called The Bend and combine it with a public project called Westside Evolves from the Chattanooga Housing Authority. And so as a reminder, The Bend is a substantial economic development project which proposes to create over 1 million square feet of new commercial office space, over 500,000 square feet of retail space, additional green space and space for entertainment and recreation, about 1,500 residential units, which includes both multifamily as well as for rental, as well as ownership in the form of condos and townhomes, and then, of course, approximately 500 hotel rooms. You would also see park space on the riverfront with some improvements to the Riverwalk, as well as a marina. We wanted to correct this for the record. So at our last meeting, we talked about the affordable housing commitment that is part of the Bend. And so that affordable housing commitment is for the 1,200 multifamily rental units, not for the entirety of the housing units that would be created. And so there would be approximately 300 units for ownership in the form of condos or townhomes. But the affordable housing commitment is for 10% of the multifamily rental housing units, which would be approximately 1,200 units, to be affordable to people or households at 80% AMI or below for a period of 10 years. And so we just wanted to make sure that the council understood that. Additional community benefits that we have envisioned as part of this plan would be a pretty hefty utilization of diverse business contractors to help with some of the contracting and work on the site, as well as a commitment to use environmental sustainability products and practices, the dedication of park space to the city, and of course, new public infrastructure, multimodal connectivity improvements, and amenity assessments in the form of some sort of a business improvement district for the area. This is the affordable housing commitment, just as a reminder of the Westside Evolves plan. So right now, we are talking about 629 units of affordable housing that is income restricted for families making between 0 and 30% of the area median income. That is what is currently existing today between College Hill Courts and the Gateway Tower. And so as a reminder, Westside Evolves is a revitalization plan that is focused on those two properties, Gateway Tower and College Hill Courts. So if you look at the bottom chart, that 629 units will be replaced, and that is what would be affordable to people between 0 and 30% of the area median income. Additionally, you would see units, approximately 178 units, that would then be affordable for families making between 31 and 60% of the area median income. These are all units that qualify for low-income housing tax credits. And then you would also see an additional 267 units for families making between 61 and 80% of the area median income, which is what we've also designated as workforce housing. And then you would also see some market rate units in there as well. And so this is an opportunity to preserve the 629 units that currently exist today and to create new, brand new housing because as we mentioned at our last presentation, College Hill Courts was built back in 1940. And so when you're looking and working with a housing development that is now 83 years old, there is a lot of deterioration that has happened, a lot of deferred maintenance that has happened. And so this is an opportunity to build new units for residents of College Hill Courts and Gateway Tower. Again, we tried to create this project in a way to really sort of combine pretty robust community benefits. And so in addition to the TIF, to support the public infrastructure, all of the school taxes that would be dedicated to public education would be protected with an additional commitment to public education from the city. And then you would see over $80 million that could be dedicated to Westside Evolves over the period of the TIF. In addition, of course, you could see over 2,000 jobs created, hundreds of millions of dollars new investments, and of course, new green space and new connections to the river. And so I want to be respectful of the council's questions from our last presentation. And so I'd like to ask Ms. Carmen Chubb, President of Columbia Residential, to come up to respond to some of the questions that were raised at our last meeting. So, you're going to go use that.
Okay. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for allowing us to come back before you today to address your concerns or questions that you've raised related to the redevelopment of the West Side. Today, I will focus primarily on the resident survey results and what that means for the phasing of the redevelopment, the residents' right to return to the West Side when the construction is complete, and then the rezoning questions that you raised during our previous discussions. I first want to say thank you for the feedback related to the survey. The Chattanooga Housing Authority team did an updated survey. They set a goal to survey 75% of the residents in both Gateway Tower and College Hill Courts. They had a team knocking on doors for about a 2-week period. As a result of that, we were able to achieve 70 households that responded in Gateway Tower and 317 households that responded in College Hill Courts. That was slightly, on the College Hill Courts, slightly below the goal of 327. For those households that did not respond, the CHA team visited those homes at least 5 times to try to get responses. So we think it is a very robust survey response, and we appreciate your feedback in getting us to get those numbers updated. What you will find from the survey results, the questions are outlined on this slide as well as the responses. But in summary, as it relates to the new housing that is constructed over the redevelopment period, 80% of the residents in Gateway Tower would like to come back and make sure they have an opportunity to live in the new housing, and that number is 82% for College Hill Courts. And we'll talk more about residents who are relocated during construction coming back, but this is the preferences of the residents. We also wanted to know how many of those residents wanted to remain in the Westside during the construction period. In Gateway Tower, we found that 54 households, or 77%, wanted to remain on site during construction. And for College Hill Courts, that number is 47%, so it's 149 households. When we worked on the phasing, which we'll go through, we looked at 50% to make sure at any point 50% of the residents who wanted to remain on site during construction could do so. We followed up that question with people who said, no, I don't want to remain on site during construction. We asked about the housing preferences there. They were given the opportunity to say they wanted to live at another CHA community, receive a housing choice voucher. The other option was either a voucher or a community, and in some cases, residents did not specify a preference. But for where a preference was specified, it was for the housing choice voucher. And then right behind that, either on a CHA-owned property or a voucher. And then we asked the question, based on the feedback from council, whether the residents were interested in homeownership opportunities. And overwhelmingly in College Hill Courts, we found 65% of the people who responded are interested in homeownership opportunities. And then at Gateway Tower, that number was 12%, which was 8 households and 206 in College Hill Courts. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. One of the things we want to emphasize about the housing plan as it relates to the phasing, it relies heavily on the residents' articulated choices. So we looked at the survey, 50% of the residents would like to remain. I'm talking about College Hill Courts now because that's where the first phases will be. 50%, we factored in 50% of the residents remaining on the west side during the construction. And we were able to accommodate that in the phase-in plan. The residents who wish to remain on site will either be able to move into a new unit or an existing unit on site. So we will have enough units, new units, available for 50% of the residents whose buildings are demolished. But if that number is higher, we'll have opportunities to relocate those households on site as well. Those who wish to move off-site during construction will have the opportunity to return to the property, but in the meantime, will have either a housing choice voucher or reside at a CHA-owned community. And one of the things I want to emphasize here, because I know during this process, there's a lot of moving parts for residents as they see construction going on at the site and they're making choices about what they want to do. CHA has hired 2 organizations to work one-on-one with those households to help them plan for what their choice is and to make the process as easy as possible for the residents. So they will not be left to figure all this out on their own. They'll have someone working with them one-on-one throughout that entire process. The next slide you'll see is the phasing plan. And this really is included to show that at every stage of the redevelopment, we are able to accommodate 50% of the residents. So that number that said they wanted to remain on site during construction, we're able to accommodate that, in this case, in new housing. But if the numbers change and more people want to remain on site, we have opportunities with existing housing on the west side. So just to walk through, I won't go through this entire chart, but just so you can see how we're working through it. The first phase is where we call it site prep on this slide, but it's the demolition of the YFD site. So in the build first concept, first we will demolish YFD, we will build 230 units of housing on that site. And of those 230, 92 of those units are replacement units. So before anybody has to move from their current housing, new housing will be built. We will allow some time for residents to relocate either to that new housing, or if their choice is to move off-site, they'll have the opportunity to do that. And then we'll have the first phase of demolition. And you'll see in that case, we are demolishing 116 units. If we consider half of those residents want to remain on site, that's 58 replacement units that need to be available, and we have 92 available for those residents. So if you follow that chart throughout, you'll see in every case, we have sufficient units available for the residents who have indicated they want to remain on site. And we understand those preferences may change, and we can adjust the phasing and accommodate those preferences throughout the process. The next point I want to make sure I address your concerns about is the residents' right to return. CHA and Columbia Residential are committed to ensuring that every resident currently existing on the site has the opportunity to return to the site if they relocate during construction. Some will remain on the site and never move off, but those who choose to move during construction will have the right to return. And not only a right, we will facilitate through CHA's partners, facilitate their return to the property. There are a lot of federal requirements that govern the residents' right to return. Those are governed by HUD, the Choice Neighborhoods Program, but certainly by you, the council, as we come before you to give you updates or to request funding or other actions. You have that opportunity for sure to hold us accountable to that. There are two exceptions outlined in federal law that are not discretionary. And those two exceptions are individuals who are required to be listed on the Lifetime Sex Offender Registry, or individuals who are convicted of manufacturing or producing methamphetamine on a federally assisted housing property. So those are two things that I would say are non-discretionary, but otherwise we will not rescreen. Individuals will have the opportunity to return to the West Side. That's a commitment from us. We have, as the developer, we've done this in many communities, and it is something we're very accustomed to and something we value. There were some concerns raised about the rezoning, and we definitely took all of that concern and feedback into consideration. The short-term vacation rentals will not be included in the rezoning request. The single-unit attached ADUs, we believe that those support homeownership opportunities on the west side, and we are happy to support that in the rezoning. And then there were some other uses that were included initially that we heard your concerns about, and those are not central to the master plan, and we don't have any intention of asking that those be included, that the council can determine if they want to have those in as a special request or other opportunity for those to come in, but we have removed those from our request. And then on homeownership, I know I talked about the response that we got from residents, particularly in College Hill Courts, about their desire to pursue homeownership. The CHA administrative plan has a process and certainly allows a housing choice voucher recipient to use their voucher for homeownership. There are certain processes and steps that the family and the household would have to take to pursue homeownership opportunities, but it's a great opportunity to use the voucher to cover a portion of the homeowner's cost. And I know Jermaine is going to talk more about homeownership programs available. There's a financial counseling and homeownership counseling component of homeownership that is required in the CHA administrative plan. And CHA's partner, CNE, or the Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, is authorized and eligible to conduct all of the homeownership counseling required under the plan. So this was something that was certainly a bright spot that we learned about from the survey, and giving people opportunity to achieve homeownership is something that we're all committed to. Okay.
And as a follow-up to the homeownership piece, we really appreciate the council and really sort of pushing for us to conduct a new survey, because it did allow us to elicit the feedback about wanting to move into homeownership. And so this is a shameless plug for the City of Chattanooga's program, but we do have a first-time homebuyer grant and loan program that we are now operating through the Department of Economic Development in partnership with the Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise. So this represents a unique opportunity for the city to work, and CNE to work with some of the residents who are currently living in College Hill Courts, because we obviously saw much higher interest in homeownership from College Hill Courts than in Gateway Tower. But this represents an opportunity for us to work with all of those households to provide opportunities for first-time homeownership for eligible families. And so just wanted to put some of the conditions and eligibility requirements about the city's homebuyer program up on the screen for people to see. As we continue through this process, there are several resolutions that are on your proposed agenda for next week, and they include things that are from the Westside Evolves plan on the critical path list. And so this council has already taken action to adopt the Westside Evolves plan, transferring the former YFD administrative property at 501 West 12th Street will help Chattanooga Housing Authority and Columbia Residential to kick off that first phase of construction in pursuit of the Build First strategy. And so that's a unique opportunity, because there is actually land that the Housing Authority and Columbia Residential can actually turn to and do phase one. And so that's a really big plus. Also, one of the resolutions under your consideration is for the city and the Housing Authority to partner to apply for the Choice Neighborhoods grant from HUD, which is also in the critical task list, as well as working to make sure that we can apply for LIHTC funding and continue to apply for other funding sources for this. And so in looking back at the Westside Evolves plan itself, this comes from the Westside Evolves plan. And so this talks about some of the financing tools and structures that the Housing Authority should pursue in an effort to get the Westside Evolves plan funded. And so as you can see, low-income housing tax credit equity is up there, which you heard about from Christina during our last presentation. Tax increment financing is up there, which you hear about from me all the time. And so this is an opportunity for us to continue to pursue all of the things that were outlined as part of the Westside Evolves plan. There are also other funding opportunities, including the CDBG, which is one of the resolutions for next week, is the commitment of city CDBG funding. That, of course, is also federal funding that comes from HUD that can be used for community development activities. But these are other funding sources that could also be pursued as well, that are also contained in the Westside Evolves plan. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were responsive to the council to is, again, this comes from the economic impact plan, which you all now have access to, but there is an excerpt in the plan itself that basically says that no incremental revenues shall be allocated to CHA until the council has approved a relocation plan to your satisfaction. So I just wanted to make sure that was just a friendly reminder to the council. And so as we close, our next steps are, obviously, you all have the ability to consider the economic impact plan along with the county commission, and then a development plan would eventually come before the City of Chattanooga's Industrial Development Board. And with that, I will take any questions, and Carmen is available for questions as well.
All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation, Carmen and Jermaine. I know our last meeting was a little tense, but I appreciate you all going out and doing the requested survey. Just a couple of comments. I appreciate the survey because it does change the narrative about people in College Hill courts. I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, these are people that don't want to do anything or whatever, but you see through that, especially with the home ownership, that people have ambitions. Everybody doesn't have a father or mother that left them property or a way to, navigate certain circumstances. So to see that there are ambitions and there are programs in place to help with those are important. And I think when we reviewed this material prior, I think we were all surprised at the amount of people that wanted home ownership. So I think that is very important. I'm glad that we are able to phase everyone in that would like to be phased in, and not just assuming stuff. And so I do appreciate the amendments that are there. And overall, I am very pleased with the outcome of these things. And also specifying, I know initially we would hear that, hey, they would, if they qualified to come back, but it's important to note the only 2 reasons they will not be able to return are if they are on the sex offender registry and if they are producing meth in the development, in the
In the
home.
Chattanooga Housing Authority property.
Right.
Yes.
So other than that, everybody, and there will be no rescreening. They will be able to come right in as long as they're there when it starts. So I think those are important notes. And I think that's all I had. I just really appreciate all the work that was put in to make sure that this was done in an equitable, transparent, and accountable way. And moving forward, we will be, a part of that amendment will be just making sure that this survey is done semi-annually. So we'll have that, and we're able to track that along the way, so we'll know, because as the project gets closer, as things are built, they get ready to move in, that's when it'll really, really count. But right now, we just need to at least have some starter data, and we can move on. So just very much a friendlier meeting. Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. This survey was really eye-opening. I was thrilled to see the interest in homeownership, but really astounded at the difference between the original survey interest in staying on property and now, as we've had a greater conversation about this project. And I think that the intense attention that the council has given to this project has given the community at large more time to say, what's going on? And to see these renderings and to say, I love the West Side and I want to be a part of this. And that's really encouraging to me. And I appreciate the projections and the thoughtfulness that you all have to be able to provide 50% so that people are able to stay as things are being built out. I have a few detail-oriented questions, Jermaine.
Yes, ma'am.
The 120 affordable units at 80% AMI on the Bend,
Yes, ma'am.
10 years
Yes, ma'am.
is the extent that they will be affordable.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Regarding the affordable units within the Westside,
Yes, ma'am.
we've talked a lot about 1,700 affordable units, but really we have 1,074 affordable units because we've got 709 that are going all the way up to unrestricted
Well-
market rate.
Yes, but I think that with the Housing Authority and Columbia Residential, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think that they would probably say, similar to some of our other housing partners, there are times when we have market rate housing that is actually below market rate. And so it is, but it's not going to be, it would be considered above 80% AMI, to be fair.
So would you mind joining us? So let's get that on the record. So from Columbia Residential, Jermaine, you're suggesting that the 81% AMI to unrestricted AMI, or unrestricted rent, is it in fact the case that Columbia Residential's market rate rents run consistently lower than a standard market rate rent apartment? And to what, give us an example of an Atlanta market rate apartment at a Columbia Residential versus one right across the street from you.
So I would say that we do find that our market, we use the term market rate to mean that they're not income restricted. So people don't have to come in and prove that they're at a certain income level. But mostly we find that those units lease around 80% or slightly above. We don't restrict the rent to that level, but just by nature of the mixed income development, we find that they hover around 80 to 90% of the area median income, but they are not restricted.
Okay, so if you've got a two-bedroom in Atlanta at a Columbia property, and across the street you have a two-bedroom with another group that is not a LIHTC developer, what is the rent differential?
Usually if they're that close in proximity, like right across the street, the rent differential won't be significant because the rent that is charged at the market is usually based on the market area. But I would say if it's a redevelopment and other housing isn't adjacent to it, you could see $100, $150, $200 difference. It depends. I don't want to say a specific number because it depends on the market area.
Okay, thank you for that. So Jermaine,
Yes, ma'am.
so we don't have a commitment on that, but so we just know we don't have a commitment on that. The 1,074 units, how many years are they guaranteed affordable at those rates, at those AMI rates?
Let's go back to that.
Knowing that our Bend properties, those 120 units are only guaranteed affordable at 80% AMI for 10 years.
So they should be affordable for as long as the LIHTC allocation lasts, which, let me defer to
Yeah.
Betsy on that. Christine.
Yeah. So I would say that there's different affordability periods in the LIHTC program. The initial is 15, but it's really a 30-year affordability period. But when Columbia redevelops, we seek permanent affordability. So
Okay.
we will, when the affordability restrictions are set to expire, our intent would be to recapitalize the property, update it, and make sure it is with current finishings, et cetera, and retain the affordability restrictions.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. That's really helpful. Jermaine, the CDBG allocation for this project for the city, how much are you all going to be recommending to council that we allocate from the CDBG budget?
I believe that we are, let me double check that with Nicole, but I'll get that answer to you
Okay.
today.
Is that coming from this year's CDBG allocation?
Yes.
Okay. So FY '24. Okay. And then a final thing that I'd just like to slightly editorialize on is going back to the conversation about home ownership. it's fantastic for people to have an interest in homeownership, but my understanding is that many people who want to own a home are not actually prepared to purchase a home. And so the partnership that Chattanooga Housing Authority has with C&E to have education related to how to be ready to become a homeowner and understand that potentially multi-year process, I think is a critical relationship. I'm glad you have it, and I hope that the city will continue to support C&E's work so that they can provide that kind of financial counseling, because while it's not creating a unit, it's creating a homeowner, and that's really important. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much.
And
Well,
Madam-
and thank you, Housing Authority, for listening. You guys have done a lot of work on this, and I, for one, really appreciate it. So thank you.
And Madam Vice Chair, just for clarification, the CDBG allocation is $1.5 million over an 8-year period.
Over 8 years. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Any other comments or questions? All right, I don't see any more lights. That is it. Wow, surprise.
Thank you.
All right, council, I don't see any more lights or any more comments or questions. So remember, we do have a attorney-client meeting after this meeting. Other than that, meeting's adjourned. Progress. I told you, you said, how do we build the bridge, Ricky? I was like, fuck the bridge.